Today we're going to educate you on the forefathers of the cocktail recipes that you know and love.
Brought to you by AwesomeDrinks.com. Check out learn.awesomedrinks.com to learn more about cocktails.
Welcome to Combat Cocktails. I'm Derek, and today we're going to continue the series, Course 2, from learn.awesomedrinks.com, that's going to kickstart your way into becoming a great home bartender or a professional bartender. Once you get your job as a professional bartender, leave me some tips. You can check us out at patreon.com/CMC. Or just buy stuff from our store. Since I'm giving you free information, all I ask from you in return is like the video and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're on YouTube watching it. Let's talk about the cocktail industry. Understand where you come from helps give you a glimpse of where you're going. And most of the individuals I'm going to cover left their mark on the cocktail industry not because of one specific recipe they created, but because how they built catalogs and references for the future bartenders. Quite honestly, without a lot of these founding forefathers of the cocktail industry, many of these recipes would have been lost. We might not even know what a daiquiri is if it wasn't for somebody documenting it. So let's start by looking at Jerry Thomas. I believe I have a Jerry Thomas reference guide here, How to Mix Drinks. Born in 1830, this guy is probably what today we'd call a flair bartender. He was nicknamed the Professor, and he's well known for a lot of his cocktails, but he's very well known for his book. He was the first person to publish a cocktail book in the United States, and that book was once called The Bartender's Guide. Let's still call it The Bartender's Guide. Or How to Mix Drinks, depending on the publication and the year. This specific, I think this publication is 1867. There was no blogs, there was no internet. You had to print your stuff, and printing wasn't easy either. Presumably, you need to know somebody with a printing press. Then you have to market it. That's just a lot of work. What he did is he categorized a lot of the base cocktail formulas. He had your sours, your fizzes, your fixes, your flips, your daisies, and in his 1876 edition, he included the Tom Collins. First to ever publish a Tom Collins. His reference is pretty old, and you sometimes need a key to decrypt the measures. I don't know exactly how many ounces are in a wine glass, but the ratios and concepts will help you, especially as a reference. I wouldn't go into this book to pick the next Martinez recipe I was going to create, but I would use this as a reference manual to understand what I'm creating in some of the more popular ratios that worked and have worked for over 100 years, which is why I actually own a print version of this book. By the way, link below for all the scanned in. These are vintage books that are open source. I don't know what you call it when they're open, but they're all scanned in and printed. So there's a website linked in the description that you could go to get the scan-in version of these if you want to just peruse or buy a print copy on like Amazon or something. The second person to note goes by the name of Harry Craddock. He was a famous bartender in the 20s and the 30s, and he's well known today for publishing the Savoy Cocktail Book. And you'll notice one thing about these cocktail books, most of mine, have little things sticking out of them. These are reference areas that I go to repeatedly. I should probably come up with a better organization method. The Pegu Club cocktails on here, so I'm guessing that was the one I was probably referencing here. This collection has over 750 cocktail recipes, and it's still in print today. He also apparently helped invent the Corpse Survivor No. 2 and the White Lady. And Gary Regan considers him the most influential person of the 20th centuries in terms of cocktails. Again, a big reference that when combined with other cross-references starts to really narrow into how cocktails are created. The next influence is Harry Johnson. It's an awful name. He published a book called The Bartender's Manual. I don't own that one. It covers martinis, brandy flips, brandy crustas, and such. But his big claim to fame within that text is how to become a bartender. Before the internet, when the press was just becoming a thing, where do you get your resources? It was either you're training with professionals or you're learning by just observing. How else are you going to get any information? These books were essential to learn how to become a bartender, how to order supplies, how to handle customers, how to handle lunch, breakfast, and dinners, and all the different things that go into a restaurateur and bartending. Remember, they didn't have learn.awesomedrinks.com. They didn't have YouTube. He made bartenders of the time better because he gave them focus and structure. The next book, which I might have someplace, is The Fine Art of Mixing Drinks. David Embry. He was born in 1886, and he helped define a lot of the different cocktail formulas, like the one we mentioned in our last episode in the 2-1-1, which is the 8-2-1 ratio. Spirit, sour, and sweet, making a light sweeter drink with a little more alcohol accenting. But what he did is he broke down the cocktail. He gave you all the different reference points to how to build a cocktail. What your base spirit was, your modifying agents, your coloring agents. And he allowed new bartenders to wrap their mind around how to create a craft cocktail. And ironically, he was an attorney. He wasn't a bartender. He's a cocktail enthusiast that just wanted to show other people how to create great cocktails. Sort of like I'm trying to do here. The big deal, and the thing that separates him from me, is he's influenced cocktail creating bartenders and home mixologists for a century. That's pretty dang cool. The fifth on my list is Don Beach. If you're into cocktails, especially tiki cocktails, you probably have heard of Don Beach. Born in 1907, he revolutionized the cocktail industry completely different. He helped create the Polynesian pop tiki culture. He defined tiki bar. A lot of his cocktails tended to be very grapefruit focused and have a little bit of that tart bitterness to them. And within his restaurants, he hired a bunch of Cantonese chefs, and they created what we now call American Chinese food. Your crab rangoons, your steak on a stick, all the stuff that you get that people go, that's not real Chinese food. You could thank folks like Don Beach. His biggest claim to fame was his secrecy. Don Beach had a habit of creating cocktails, but not with the specific ingredients in mind, not telling you what syrups you needed. He built syrup blends and cocktail blends in bottles and numbered them like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And now, as a bartender, your recipe was 2 ounces of bottle 1, 2 ounces of bottle 3, a half ounce of bottle 6. If you went to a new establishment, you would never be able to reproduce that drink, which is why the zombie has been reproduced so many times and is so created vastly inaccurate from so many different bartenders because everybody had a guess on what a zombie cocktail actually was based on what they thought they were tasting. It was kind of like patenting your cocktails before that was a thing. I'm looking at you, goslings. Don Beach is also credited by some as being the creator of a Mai Tai, along with his real rival, Victor Bergeron. Which brings us to number 6, Victor Trader Vic Bergeron. Born in 1902, Trader Vic borrowed $500 and created Hinky Dinks. It was a restaurant that served rum-based cocktails and kind of like this tiki culture stuff, sort of like Don Beach was doing, because I think there was a little bit of influence there. Somebody got kicked out of Don Beach's bars a few times. That Hinky Dink brand would later become known as Trader Vic's, a restaurant brand that still exists today. And he also created the Mai Tai. His Mai Tai happens to be one of the most famous and industry standard recipes out of all the tiki drinks that you're ever going to see. The Mai Tai is probably the one that leads right at the top. If you're big into restaurants, you may know he also is the founder and kind of the staple template standard of how you create a themed chain restaurant. Trader Vic contributed to tiki the kitsch nature that you see when you walk into a tiki themed restaurant and they've got the masks and the bright flowers and the crab traps and all that like island motif. That was all Trader Vic's doing. As a matter of fact, it was said that he used to get some of his clientele to bring him these crazy things that he could put into his restaurant, and in return, he would make them drinks or serve them dinner at no charge. Making Vic Bergeron a trader, trading drinks for random junk that would look good in his restaurant. So, advancing tiki pop culture, helping to create one of the best tiki drinks of all time, not a bad legacy. 7th on our list is Gary Gaz Regan. He published many books, including The Joy of Mixology. He's a world-renowned expert of cocktails, and of course created Regan's Orange Bitters No. 6. Gary's book is definitely something I use as a reference. This is a little bit more up to date, so it kind of has a blend in the beginning of how to actually become a bartender, and then all the recipes kind of sprayed within the back of the book here. But each one of these recipes has an explanation to what it is, why it's there, so it's got knowledgeable information as well as the recipes itself. 8th on the list is Dale DeGroff. I don't have anything from Dale DeGroff. Known as King Cocktail, he was born in 1948, and he's the founder of the Museum of the American Cocktail. And, oh wait, no I do! And the book, The Craft Cocktail. Duh. It's got 500 recipes in it. This is one of the ones that I go to when I need to figure out, is this recipe legit? When somebody submits me a recipe and I go, that looks like a valid cocktail that's kind of in the classic, modern classic realm, let's look it up and see if this is close, because it doesn't look balanced. I go through here and I look at what this recipe says. Sometimes I'll even break out The Joy of Mixology and see what the two ratios and the differences between the two cocktails and figure out if I want to create a third. He was the head bartender at the Rainbow Room in the mid-80s in New York City, and he's considered one of the foremost cocktail experts of this time. Now, there's a ton of other people that could have their own monologue worth of time and effort into influencing the cocktail industry. Ada Coleman was one of the pioneer female cocktail bartenders that kind of paved the way for females becoming bartenders. Also mentored Harry Craddock, and I believe created the Hanky Panky cocktail, which he published. Harry McElhon, if I'm saying that correctly, is another great cocktail creator who created the French 75, the Monkey Gland, and founded the primary concept of Bloody Mary. Another big, important step in cocktail creation. Hugo Ensslin published a book in 1917 called The Recipes for Mixed Drinks. It was the last book published before Prohibition, which I'm guessing tanked his sales. Hugo's also well known as the inventor of the aviation, and we have that recipe in our archive as well. And Constante Vert, he was a Cuban bartender that perfected the daiquiri, and he also served and inspired Ernest Hemingway. The Hemingway Daiquiri, Daiquiri number 3, this bartender can take responsibility for that. He also created a famous cocktail called the El Floridita, and a whole host of other cocktails, kind of in the Cuban vein back in Havana. A lot of those individuals were bartenders that either created drinks or built reference material for other bartenders. A new series of bartenders that I kind of consider in the same category as Dale DeGroff, more cocktail historians and people that dig deep, the people that dive deep into some of the histories, is David Wondrich. He takes some of the mysteries behind cocktails, like the Harvey Wallbanger, figures out the history, does the research, reads through all those little periodicals and microfiche at random libraries around the world, and he tries to piece together how cocktails that are here today got to where they are. Because there's a lot of mystery and intrigue and just false stories around cocktails. His goal is to figure out what is the real story. Is there a real story? Then there's folks like Jeff Berry. He's a restaurant owner and he's kind of an investigator of all things tiki. Potions of the Caribbean, by the way, is probably one of the most fantastic cocktail recipe books I've ever read. The cocktail recipes themselves, not all of them are great, but they're historically accurate with a whole trail and timeline of history. This is a history book with interaction, because you can make the drinks from history. Jeff Berry is the one who dug down and figured out how the zombie was created so that we can make them today. It turns out it's not a slurry 80s drink that's just a pile of crap. There's actually a good recipe base behind it. Plus, I mean, the guy shook my hand when I left Latitude 29 back in New Orleans a couple years ago. That was pretty cool. But if you're looking to learn cocktail origin and cocktail history focused on island cocktails, a lot of rum, this is the book that you want to get. You want to look at all the different Jeff Berry recipes. Also, he goes by the name Beach Bum, Jeff Beach Bum Berry. So check out Sippin' Safari and Remixed if you want some up-to-date, great resources. These are definitely more in-depth into the cocktail recipes, where Potions of the Caribbean really covers some of the histories. But there is histories and reasons why and research behind the recipes within these little texts here. A lot of these authors, they worked with some very base material. They didn't have all the spirits and liqueurs we have today. They don't have the super refined distilled gins that exist, some of the bourbons that exist today. A lot of their stuff didn't have the same character and flavor that some of the craft artisanal people are making today. And they still figured out how to make fantastic cocktails that have lasted over 120 years. So if there's one thing to learn, it's to do some research into a few of these people that interest you. My personal is Jeff Berry. Figure out what made them tick, what made them get into the craft cocktail industry. What did they do for the craft cocktail industry? And when you're serving your guests a daiquiri, explain to them where it came from. Tell them who was the author of some of those drinks. What's so special about the Bloody Mary that they're drinking? Who created the Clover Club and why is it such a fantastic drink? You might inspire the next bartender to go out, get a job, publish the next big book that inspires our next generation of cocktail creators. So while you're mixing those drinks, tell those stories, inspire our next generation. In the next episode, we're going to talk about taking that 2-on-1 ratio and expanding upon it with bitters and other type of stuff. For now, start your journey as a home cocktail mixologist. Go get yourself a bartender starter kit. Click below, or you can head over to awesomedrinks.com and check out the home bartender starter kit from there. The sidebar for 2 playlists, Course 1 and Course 2. Course 1 is all about using those bartender tools. Course 2, the one you're watching, understanding cocktails. That's it. We're teaching you how to drink.